Welcome to Marney Reid Presents Connect to Develop, where we provide insight from healthcare leaders on the hottest topics and trends. Hello, listeners, and today's topic and guest is applicable really to anyone in any stage of their career, whether you are a physician or a corporate person, as we say. We have an incredible guest. Cynthia goes by Cindy Walker, who is the Senior Vice President of Global Medical Education at Smith+Nephew, and we're going to talk about the soft skills required to develop what we call executive presence, which directly impacts your leadership skills and the ability to get promoted. Hi, Cindy.
Hey, Marnie, how are you? Thank you so much for having me. This is super exciting. It's a great opportunity to share some of the things that I've learned over the years, maybe some of the mistakes that I've made. I think developing those soft skills, executive presence, of course, is a skill. It's something that you learn over time by understanding the perception others have of you, by observing others and learning the things that, gosh, I'd love to be able to do that. Or maybe some of the things that you never want to do. So it's observing and it's practicing.
So as you've climbed the ladder in two of the largest medical device companies out there, can you share some of the soft skills you've acquired over time that have really helped you take that next step and got you where you are today?
Sure. It's not just one thing. And I think sometimes when people think about executive presence, they think of the way that you look. And I would say that's one thing, but it's also about how you communicate. And do you instill confidence in others? Do you have a vision for what you're doing? Are you able to communicate it both in person, presenting, and in the written form? Do people understand the direction that you want to take them? And so those are some of the skills that I think about when I think about executive presence. Do people know that you're in the room? And do they know that you're in the room from a positive perspective, not that you're a disruptor? So over my career, I certainly have made some mistakes. I was fortunate to have coaches, managers, mentors. They were like, hey, you know what the perception of you is? And that's good information to listen to because whether you believe it yourself or not, it's still information. And it's something that you may not necessarily have to react to, but you keep in the back of your mind. And you can observe the way that others are responding to you. So at the end of the day, in order to utilize your personal skills from an executive presence perspective, those soft skills, you really have to know how you are impacting others around you. And so I'd say those are the things over time that I, continue to think about. I continue to practice every single day. Times change. And so I always need to up my game a little bit, I would say.
Don't we all? There's a quote I heard early in my career that there's always going to be someone younger and hungrier coming up behind you.
Yeah, that's a good one, especially as I talk about a career of significant experience.
Yes, absolutely. Well, let's talk about, you alluded to coaches and managers and mentors. There's really three key components that I know everyone hears about mentors, but as someone who now has had and can play all of these roles, can you share the role that the sponsor, the mentor, and the advisor have in someone's career trajectory?
Yeah, I think I've had the opportunity to be on both ends of that. And I think when you are taking in feedback from others, from an advisor, from a mentor, sponsor, a mentor, I always say, people will confuse the terms mentor and coach. That has to be someone who is equally invested in your development. It can't be, in my opinion, someone who is assigned to you. It's someone who really wants to get behind you and provide you candid and sometimes straight talk feedback. A sponsor is, I think, the opportunity for someone in another role to kind of reach down or across and pull you up with them. Similar to an advisor, I would kind of put an advisor and a mentor maybe in the same pool. But as someone who's receiving advice, I think the first thing that you have to do is be open to it. You can't be defensive. I often tell people, or when I hear it myself, well, that's the perception. Is it reality or not of how that individual feels that they behave or, communicate or whatever it might be? But it is the perception and it's somebody else's reality. So you as the person being coached, mentored, advised, you have to take that in and see with it what you are going to do with it to adjust it to a positive perception of you. So you have to be open to that, because sometimes you're not going to necessarily hear, gosh, you look great today and you are wonderful. Sometimes, when you embrace that type of a relationship with someone, you're counting on them to give you that straight talk, that feedback. I've had the good fortune of having some both in a constructive situation and in a non-constructive situation where I didn't fully understand the impact I was having on others, both in the written and personal form. And that feedback really helped to put me on the straight and narrow. And when I stumble and don't necessarily get the response from others that I was hoping for, I always think back to those little tips that are in the back of my mind. Did I do that again? Is there a way for me to correct the perception or improve my communication as well? And then when I take on the role as a sponsor, a mentor, advisor, coach, or whatever, I make sure that I understand the person that I'm coaching and what their psyche is, if you will. And so that they know when I am providing the feedback that it really is with their success and advancement in mind. And I believe, maybe it's kind of where I'm from in the world and kind of grew up in the Pittsburgh environment where we tend to be straight talkers. I believe that to be a trusted coach and advisor, they're counting on you to give you candid feedback and not necessarily sugarcoat it.
What do you wish you had learned and applied earlier on in your career that could have helped with your advancement?
Yeah, a couple things. And again, when I think about executive presence, it's several different skills, if you will. One, I think that people obviously go to is your appearance. Are you dressing appropriately? And honestly, I think that's changed over time. It's certainly changed over the course of my career. It used to be that, you kind of had to look like the men in the room. Nowadays, not so much. And nowadays, the world is not as buttoned up. Men don't necessarily have to wear a tie, as an example. They can go open collar and look very professional. After COVID, I think people took on a bit more of a relaxed environment as well. But how you show up is super important. One of the things I learned early on in my career, and I use the phrase with folks, am I day to night in my appearance or am I night to day? And in particular, I had a hairstyle way back when that I thought was awesome. And I thought it was quite fashionable. And when I had gone to get my hair cut, I had gotten the feedback from someone, oh my goodness, you look so much more professional now. And I was so insulted because I thought I was looking pretty damn good before that. And it took me a long time to get over that bit of feedback, but that person was spot on. And that at that point in my career, I was definitely going night to day versus day to night. And that was something like, oh boy, how am I showing up here? And do I look the part, if you will? I think another lesson was in my written communication. And I had a boss one time, a manager, it was vice president. And I wrote an incredible email to him about all of my accomplishments. And my boss was a very busy man. He had lots of different functions reporting into him, but I was so proud of all of my accomplishments and really felt the need to capture every single one of them in detail in this email. And several weeks later, after not hearing from him, I said, hey, did you get my email? And he goes, which one? I go, well, I wrote you this email. And he goes, you mean the long one? And I said, yep. And he said, no, I didn't read it. That was way too long for me. And I'm like, I was crushed. But point well taken. I need to know who I'm communicating with so that I can make sure that I am communicating in a fashion that they want to hear it. And it's articulate and it's to the point. And I've used that example several times. Do you read your email before you send it? The written word is, if people can't understand where you're coming from or it is way too long, they are not going to spend the time to figure it out. And so your executive presence, your soft skill has gone completely out the window.
I was suggested by an incredible mentor that I have today to read the book Smart Brevity because I too love, very verbose, epic poem length emails. I do format, I do sub bullets, but I was told, Marney, in one scroll of the thumb, if they can't read it, then it's too long.
That's right. That's right. And in fact, those of us who have ever taken writing classes for, like in the old days, newspapers, they used to say what was above the fold. If you don't capture someone in those first couple sentences, they will not read on. They will not read on. And that's really the same when you're giving a presentation in person or even online. I think one of the other newer skills that we've all had to embrace is our digital presence. And, even before COVID, when we were on virtual calls, Zoom calls, Skype, whatever, tool we used at the time, Teams calls now as well, that I would insist people be on camera. Because if you're like me and you're not on camera, you're probably multitasking. But when you show up in a digital environment, have you, check to see what you look like. Again, executive presence. Are you dressed appropriately from the waist up, perhaps? But really, that executive presence, that soft skill of knowing how you're framed in the camera, how you're coming across, are you prepared? That goes a long way. I mean, how many times have we all been on calls virtually where, the person doesn't know how to launch PowerPoint and you've immediately lost everybody in the room.
Yeah.
Right? And executive presence, someone you want to emulate, is pretty buttoned up.
I was coached by, I would say I was forged in fire, but my first boss when I was back at this very large ambulatory surgery center company, she epitomizes executive presence. I mean, and she's 7 years younger than me, but buttoned up, prepared, knows how to present, knows how to manage up, but also knows how to, delegate. And I spent about a year and a half under Felicia and I'll be honest, there were days where she would call and I would look at the phone and go, now what did I do? And I will say, when I left that company, my first consulting gig, I reported directly into the C-suite of a 2B company. And I would not have been able to do it if it wasn't for all of the things that she worked with me on.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think that's a perfect example of being open to that feedback. And that's so important as you continue to develop those skills. Like I've said, a couple of times here, executive presence, it's skill. It's no different than, going to the driving range and practicing, hitting golf balls as an example, or practicing your putting. All of us do those sorts of things all the time. But presentation skills, really working on yourself from that perspective, all of the different aspects of executive presence, they're skills. It's not one and done. And I'm sure that a lot of the feedback that Felicia was given, she shared with you, whether it was from other people or people had shared with her own, personal development.
It's the gift that keeps on giving. But what would you say has been and continues to be the hardest lesson you've had to develop executive presence?
Holding composure under fire. I think for me, that's the tough one. When, I always say, did you just get sucker punched while you were on stage? When that challenge comes from left field, and how do you control yourself without getting defensive? How do you, I have a tendency to, react. I'm Irish by nature, fair skinned. So I'll get blotches when my blood pressure goes up and I'm standing in front of a room and I'm nervous and anxious and all that kind of good stuff. But you don't want that anxiety to be shared with your audience. So I'm, being very humble here about, kind of the situation that I'm in. So honestly, I think about it. I know that if I'm going to be presenting, someone is going to come out of left field and ask me a question that I don't necessarily know the answer to, or perhaps it's not even a fair question. We've all had those during presentations. And so you have to think about, okay, why is that person doing that? And how am I going to prepare to manage that? So I am prepared for what I'm unprepared for. And so, like I said, I sometimes get blotches. So I make sure that I've got appropriate clothing on so that nobody can see my blotches if I get them.
Full hockey mask?
Exactly. I have practiced taking a deep breath, asking the individual, I'm sorry, can you expand on that? Giving myself the opportunity to think about what's going to be the best response versus the reactive response. And that is something I have to continue to practice to today. I, don't want it to be that reactive. You want to maintain that composure and have a thoughtful response. You think through, how are you going to respond if you don't have an answer? And you want to come across as though you're informed and you're in command of the topic. And you want to make sure that you're giving the correct answer without losing confidence. And, I'll tell you, those are the tough things for me. So I'll watch other people. And when I hear the way that someone else responds in those types of situations, I write it down. And I keep a little log for myself so I can think of those ways that I will respond with composure, with professionalism, with command of my topic, yet buy myself the opportunity to come back with the right response. And that's always a better situation than giving the wrong response.
I love that. So as someone who runs an extremely large global team and hires and advances people in various stages of their career, what do you look for in the intangibles and what soft skills? I mean, you've mentioned a lot already, but let's say that I'm listening to this. Maybe I'm, a junior level manager or a, associate director, and I just don't understand why I haven't gotten to the next level. If you could just bullet point out that these are the 5, or maybe 3 to 7 or whatever that looks like, soft skills that probably any leader of your caliber is looking for that people need to be aware of and to potentially work on.
Yeah. So, when I'm looking to hire or to promote, I'm thinking about, how that individual works with others. Are they collaborative? What the customer's perception of them are. And that could be an internal customer or external customer. So how are they working from that perspective? Are they someone who is saying, I want developmental opportunities and making suggestions as to how that would work? Or are they saying, how do I get promoted? Tell me what to do. That's not necessarily the person. I want that self-motivated individual. Are they, or are they we? Do they let you speak? Are they open to new ideas? Things like that are, what I look for. One of the things that I hear a lot these days are, I'm burned out. Boy, I'll tell you, that's not necessarily the person I'm going to reach down and promote. I would rather have somebody say, my plate is runneth over. Can you help me prioritize? That shows someone who's in command of their time, and they want to make sure that they're putting their efforts forward on the activities that are going to have the largest impact. I'm looking for someone who solves the problems or makes suggestions, doesn't just, put the problem on somebody else's plate. Those are probably some of the things that I think about when I'm looking to hire or promote someone.
Absolutely. I think all of that stems from a self-awareness. And I think, looking back on my personal long development journey that continues, to unpack itself as well as others, that self-awareness piece is so critical because, I think people sit there and they go, yep, check, 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 check. I still don't get it. And, it's probably that whole perception versus intention piece.
Yeah, I think so too. One other thing I don't think that I mentioned is this person present? And I said earlier on, do people know they're in the room in a productive fashion, not a disruptive fashion? That's super important as well. Someone can sit in the room, everybody knows they're there and they've never said a word. That's executive presence.
We touched a little about dress code, and the caveat here that I'm going to give is this is a very touchy, even a woman to a woman. In this day and age, it's so hard. So this platform, we're going to tell HR managers everywhere that this is a platform for pure improvement, right? We're not calling any one individual out. Let's talk about that dress code for both men and women, because we've both seen things go the wrong way. And let's chunk it out into different environments, right? Like there's the conferences or the team meetings where you're in an actual working session. Then there's I love it when, the marketing lead goes, okay, so for this part of the sales meeting or this, conference, we want snappy casual. No one knows what that means, so let's unpack snappy casual for people and, probably based on the location you're in and the climate. And then let's also talk about that critical component of, the work happy hour or the work dinner or the work offsite function where you're, buying out, a billiards place or something, and really kind of distill what that looks like.
Yeah. So, I think when I think of that professional setting, the conference setting, the first area that you addressed, to me, that is, I always dial it up. So it's business, and try and think, if I'm a man, and I tell the same thing to my husband when we're going to a wedding. I don't want to wear a tie. Wear the tie. You could always take it off. Wear the sport coat. You could always take it off. So you want to prepare yourself for, in a conference type professional setting, you want to, whether you're female or male, you want to prepare yourself for what I would consider, the most strict professional setting, but you have the ability to dial it back if need be. In a professional setting, actually all of the settings that you just described, as a female, I want to make sure that it is respectful. I never want to go into length of skirts, but if we have to talk about length of skirts, then your skirt might be too short. And remembering, again, it's daytime. And so I think that there's lots of guidelines from that perspective. I once had someone say, in order to be professional, you have to wear nylons. And first of all, I was like, oh God, don't even say that word, nylon.
Okay, Mad Men. Should we also chain smoke too?
And I immediately shut down as soon as I heard that word. And so you have to look at kind of what the decade is that you're operating in, and look at the periodicals, look online, see what that, the height of professionalism certainly doesn't mean a tuxedo. But again, just to repeat, in that environment, I will go dressy, professional, dressy interview attire, if you will. And then you could always have the ability to back it down. And I can tell you that even though we've established that I'm experienced in years in my role, customers of all generations, male and female, recognize it. I think for the sales meeting, the snappy casual, the business casual, there's all kinds of different words that they use now. Country club classic. I've heard that one. I'm like,
yeah.
Oh, I'm not sure what that is.
Summer chic. Like summer chic, if you're in Alaska versus Florida, is probably a little different.
I know. Cruise ship casual. I've heard that one as well. I think we're just trying to get super creative. To me, again, that's not nightclub, but it is a more classy, casual type of a way. It's not shorts and a t-shirt with a logo on it. It's, something that is a little bit more dressy. I would shy away from, if I was a man, having, the first 3-4 buttons unbuttoned. You might have that on a cruise ship, but probably not at a professional. And for females, again, I would be mindful of, certainly you want to be, professional in appearance, but you want to take advantage of being a female. You don't want to dress like a man, but you don't want to be too revealing either. That's, never professional. I can remember, and this is a true story, being at a sales meeting where they had a mechanical bull, and a young lady got on the bull in a top, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And so you don't want to be that person. So when we talk about executive presence, that stays in someone's, burned into their retina for 15 years. And so you want to be mindful of those types of situations. It certainly doesn't mean that you have to be, dressing like a nun or anything like that, but classy, I guess, the way that I would look at it. I don't think there's a rule on the height of a heel, as long as you can walk in them. If you can't walk in them, don't wear them. It's kind of my take on that. I love a nice heel myself. Offsite is probably the same. If you're going to be doing a team building ropes course, dress appropriately for the ropes course, but, and then that goes for both men and women, in my opinion. I also don't think, when it comes to apparel, that you need to spend a ton of money. There's lots of tips on, how to take care of, especially when you're early in your career and you might not be have the earning potential as the CEO, on that particular day when you're clothes shopping. But really think about the types of fabrics that you're buying, ones that are going to last, things that are perhaps trendy, but not too trendy. That would be my advice. And at the end of the day, you want to maintain that classy appearance. I think one of the other things to take into account, my comments thus far really have been focused on the U.S. If you're going to be traveling outside of the U.S. into other cultures, other markets, and things like that, be cognizant of what the definitions are for each one of those settings that you just described. Some of the things that, perhaps we wear here could be somewhat insulting in other geographies. So be aware of them so that you are complementary to the culture that you, in an environment that you're going to be in.
That's a great call out. Even things as simple as the way you receive and give a business card, or, the way you greet someone and then say goodbye, are huge things to look up.
That's right. Look, they're going to know you're an American. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to behave like the cliche that often outside of the U.S. people will refer to.
Yes. Agree. To carry on this thread, let's also talk about those rules of engagement at, the social work functions. My first surgical device boss, still a close friend and mentor today, always told his team, nothing good happens at the bar after 10. Talk about those unspoken rules of engagement for people that think, oh, this is great. It's not going to harm my career. Everyone always invites me to the bar. I'm the fun person, talk about that.
Yeah, the separated between alcohol and non-alcohol. You can be the fun person without alcohol. And sometimes when you're the host, you have to learn how to practice that, right? And, I say that when I love a good glass of wine, I love, but in a professional setting, you need to know what your limits are. It's not unlike what I tell my college age daughter, how can you have a mocktail? You don't have to telegraph it. You don't have to tell everybody, but can you have soda with lime and a pretty little drink straw or whatever? And everybody thinks you're having something else, but you need to maintain your composure at all times in a business environment. From my perspective, boy, I'll tell you, there's countless times where someone's had too much. And then, of course, we all know when you've had too much, your judgment goes awry. And then you are staying out late. And everybody remembers it the next day. No question. You'll often say things. I've seen people lose their careers, their positions over alcohol. I've seen the perception of that person go from promotable to not so much this year. And so you want to make sure that those social settings are your friends and that you are, just like every other executive presence opportunity, that you're in command of it. It's not in command of you.
So in the world of Zoom and Teams meetings, messaging, remote work, it used to be that people would go into an office, they'd see each other. So if you needed to do some work on, perception or your communication or your executive presence, people could see you actually doing that. Now more and more people are working remotely. They're just Zooming in on Teams. You talked about dressing a certain way. You talked about practicing sharing a screen and getting your PowerPoint up, about how you appear on screen and how present and engaged you are. So if there's someone out there that's thinking, okay, this is all great, but my boss and senior leaders live in different areas, I'm almost never in front of them, how can they start showcasing that they have been working on things in that remote lifestyle?
Yeah. So, this is interesting because I can remember when I was in an office every single day, we went to a environment, and I had someone come into my office and say, I have to have a cube and I have to have my name on the cube. And I'm like, why? Because I want you to know that I'm there every day. And I said, well, I travel a lot. I'm not going to see you every day. I would rather know what you have accomplished than see you every day. And so I think in this remote environment, it's really the same principle. And so it comes down to a matter of demonstrating what you are delivering and keeping people informed. So, whether it's, none of us are, or at least in my role, we're not working, in our home office every single day. We're out and we're with customers, we're moving around, and I'm able to demonstrate, as are my team, by their deliverables. And so you want to not necessarily keep your boss or your peers informed about, well, I'm taking a trip and I'm going to be gone for 10 days. I want to know what you delivered over that time. How did you move the needle forward? That's much more interesting than for me to tell you how many nights I was away from home.
Is that an executive roll up once a week, once a month? I guess it depends on the role. And then how do you feel about skip level, right? Let's say that there's someone 2 levels under you that feels like their boss is just either not developing or even holding them back, in which case you're potentially missing out on a great future leader. How do they skip level appropriately?
The first thing that, if somebody calls and says, hey, look, I want to talk to you in confidence, that's in confidence. But you always want to encourage that individual in that skip level environment. Have you talked to them about that? What would be the obstacle in discussing it with your direct manager? I would say that those that are confident enough to encourage skip levels of their direct reports, that is another demonstration of executive presence to me. So the folks that report to me that encourage their teammates, their direct reports to, hey, why don't you have a skip level with Cindy every once in a while? Have her give you a different perspective. I find that to be a manager who's quite confident in their role. So I don't have an issue with skip levels unless they are covert from a perspective of they kind of want to tell on their boss. That to me is not professional. If I was going to do a skip level, I would tell my boss and make sure that, there's no secrets here. Here's what I want to address. And at times, I might even ask for advice so that we're both part of the reason why I am asking for a skip level myself.
Well, As usual, I could literally sit on the phone with you for hours, but I am sure you have many things to do. It has been an honor and a pleasure. We will also be doing more of the hard skills one. I thought it was important to put out the soft skills first. But Cindy, what an incredible discussion. I'm sure people out there took tons of notes. And thank you so much for your time, your candidness, and your advice here.
Yeah, thank you, Maury. Thanks for including me. With these types of discussions, it's certainly never a one size fits all. It is a skill. It's something that we all need to, continue to work on. I just encourage people to take that feedback, continue to seek an understanding of how you are perceived by others. Always show up, whether it's virtually or in person. Show up, be humble, be present, be articulate, and be in command of your craft and of yourself. And you will be moving forward before you know it. So I wish everybody the best of luck. And again, thank you, Marnie, for putting these amazing podcasts together. They're certainly educational for all of us at any point in our careers.
Thanks for listening to Connect to Develop. You can find more interviews and Marnie's Minutes on my YouTube channel at Marney Reid Presents.